I never thought vulnerability could feel like this, like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing one wrong move could send me tumbling, but also knowing that the view from up here is worth every second of fear. That's what loving Theo felt like from the very beginning, even before I could name it as love. My name is Adrian, and I work in corporate law at one of those glass tower firms in downtown Seattle, where everyone wears the same shade of charcoal grey and drinks the same overpriced coffee. I'd been there 3 years when Theo joined as a senior associate. I was still junior level, trying to prove myself, working 70-hour weeks and pretending I had everything figured out. Theo was different from the start. He had this quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself, dark hair that was always slightly dishevelled by the end of the day, sharp green eyes that seemed to catch everything, and this way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. The first time we really talked was during a late night at the office. I was in the break room at 9 p.m, microwaving leftover pad thai and seriously questioning my life choices when he walked in. Most senior associates wouldn't have given me a second glance, but Theo smiled. Not that corporate smile everyone wore like armour, but something real. "Burning the midnight oil?" he asked, and his voice had this warmth to it that seemed out of place in our sterile office. "More like the midnight lamp," I said. "Oil seems too expensive for what they pay me." He laughed, and I felt something flutter in my chest that I immediately tried to ignore. "I'm Theo," he said, extending his hand. "Adrian." His handshake was firm but not aggressive, and his hand was warm. I noticed that. I noticed everything about that moment, though I didn't understand why yet. "You working on the Morrison case?" he asked. I nodded. "Research brief, due tomorrow morning." "That's my case," he said, leaning against the counter. "I should have gotten you that material earlier. This is on me." I blinked. Senior associates didn't apologize to junior associates. That wasn't how the hierarchy worked. "It's fine," I managed. "It's my job." "Maybe," Theo said, "but I could make it easier. You want help?" "I've got nothing better to do than go home to an empty apartment." We ended up working side by side until 2 in the morning. Theo explained the case strategy, asked for my thoughts, actually listened when I offered them. He brought me coffee from the good machine on the executive floor. He made jokes that were actually funny, and when I finally closed my laptop exhausted but finished, he looked at me with something I couldn't quite read in his expression. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "Don't let them grind you down." I thought about that moment for days afterward, the way his eyes had held mine just a beat too long, the way my pulse had quickened. I told myself it was just gratitude, just professional respect. I was very good at lying to myself back then. Over the next few months, Theo and I developed what I thought was a friendship. We'd grab lunch together, usually at this hole-in-the-wall Vietnamese place 3 blocks from the office. We'd talk about cases, sure, but also about everything else. He told me about growing up in Portland, about his complicated relationship with his father, about the year he'd spent teaching English in South Korea before law school. I told him about my small hometown in Idaho, about being the first person in my family to go to college, about feeling like an imposter every single day. "You're not an imposter," Theo said one afternoon, chopsticks paused halfway to his mouth. "You belong here as much as anyone. More than most, actually, because you give a damn about doing good work." The way he looked at me when he said it made my stomach flip. I was starting to recognize that feeling, starting to understand what it meant. I'd had crushes before, brief and quickly buried things that I'd never let myself examine too closely. But this was different. This was deeper, more persistent, more terrifying. I'd known I was attracted to men since college, but I'd never done anything about it. Coming from where I came from, being who I was supposed to be, it seemed easier to just not deal with it. To focus on work, on building a career, on being successful enough that nothing else would matter. But Theo was making that impossible. Every time he smiled at me, every time his hand brushed mine reaching for documents, every time he texted me something funny during a boring meeting, I felt the walls I'd built crumbling a little more. The moment everything changed started with a mistake. I'd been assigned to help Theo with a major client pitch, weeks of preparation for one crucial presentation. The night before, I was doing final checks on the financial projections when I found it. An error in the spreadsheet, buried deep in the formulas. Not my error, but if I didn't say anything, it would blow up in Theo's face during the presentation. The client would catch it, or worse, wouldn't catch it until after, and Theo would take the fall. Here's the thing, though. The error originated from work I'd been assigned by Marcus Webb, one of the senior partners. Marcus was the kind of lawyer who threw people under the bus as a hobby. He'd been looking for a reason to push Theo out since Theo had gotten the promotion Marcus wanted for his own protégé. If I reported the error properly, Marcus would find a way to blame Theo anyway. But if I stayed quiet, Theo would walk into that presentation with faulty numbers. I sat in my apartment that night, laptop open, staring at those cells in the spreadsheet until my eyes blurred. I could fix it quietly, say nothing, and no one would know. Or I could tell Theo and watch the political fallout destroy him. Either way felt like betrayal. At midnight my phone buzzed. Theo. You still up? Want to do one final run through? 20 minutes later he was at my door. I'd never had him in my apartment before. It was small, barely more than a studio, but I'd made it comfortable. Books everywhere, plants on the windowsill, string lights that made everything feel softer. Theo looked around with genuine interest. This is nice, he said. It feels like you. As opposed to my office cubicle that feels like everyone. I tried to joke, but my voice came out strained. He noticed immediately. Of course he did. Adrian, what's wrong? I couldn't do it. I couldn't let him walk into that disaster. Sit down, I said. We have a problem. I showed him the error, explained the implications, traced it back to Marcus's original assignment. I watched Theo's face as he understood not just the mistake, but the politics behind it. When he looked up at me, his expression was complicated. You could have just fixed this quietly, he said. I know. Marcus will crucify me for this. He'll say I didn't properly oversee the work. I know, I said again, my throat tight. I'm sorry. I just couldn't let you go in there without knowing. Theo was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on my small kitchen table. Then he did something I didn't expect. He laughed. Not a happy laugh, but not a bitter one either. Something resigned and almost fond. You just handed me a grenade, he said, because you couldn't stand the thought of me getting hurt by it later. I guess that's one way to put it. He stood up, and for a horrible second I thought he was going to leave angry. Instead he moved closer, until he was standing right in front of where I sat. Adrian, he said softly, do you have any idea how rare that is? How many people in that office would have protected themselves first? You would have done the same for me, I said, looking up at him. Yeah, he said, and something in his voice made my heart race. I would have, because I care about you, more than I probably should. The air between us felt electric. I could see his pulse beating in his throat. I could smell his cologne, something cedar and clean. I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Theo, I started, but I didn't know how to finish. Tell me I'm reading this wrong, he said. And his voice was rough now, uncertain in a way I'd never heard from him. Tell me it's just me, and I'll leave right now, and we'll pretend this never happened. My hands were shaking. This was it. The cliff's edge. I could step back to safety or I could jump. It's not just you, I whispered. He kissed me, or I kissed him. I'm still not sure who moved first. All I know is that suddenly his hands were in my hair, and mine were gripping his shirt and his mouth was on mine, and nothing had ever felt so right and so terrifying at the same time. He kissed like he did everything else, with complete focus and attention, like I was the only thing that mattered in the entire world. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that for months, he said. Me too, I admitted. I've been so scared. Of what? Everything I wanted to say. Of wanting this. Of wanting you. Of what it means about who I am. Of losing my job. Of my family finding out. Of not being good enough at this. Of caring too much. But what came out was simpler. Of this being real. Theo's thumb traced my cheekbone, gentle and sure. It's real, he said. At least for me. Adrian, I'm falling for you. I've been falling for you since that first night in the break room when you made that terrible joke about midnight lamps. I laughed, and it came out shaky. That was a great joke. It was objectively terrible, he said, smiling. But you were so earnest about it. You're earnest about everything. It's one of the 1,000 things I love about you. Love. He'd said love. Not loved. Present tense. Love. Stay, I said, and I meant more than just tonight. He stayed. We fixed the spreadsheet together, came up with a strategy to present the correction that would minimize the fallout. Theo would take the hit, but he'd frame it as catching an error before the presentation rather than during it. It wouldn't be pretty, but it would be survivable. But mostly we talked. Curled up on my couch as the night deepened into early morning, Theo told me about his first relationship in college, about coming out to his family, about the years of therapy it had taken to be comfortable with himself. I told him about my fear, about growing up in a place where being different meant being wrong, about the shame I'd carried for so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of my DNA. "You don't have to be ashamed," Theo said, his fingers laced through mine. "Not with me. Not ever." "I don't know how to do this," I admitted. "I've never been in a relationship. Not a real one." "Neither of us have done this before," he pointed out. "Not this specific thing, you and me. We'll figure it out together." The presentation the next day went as well as could be expected. Marcus was furious about the correction, but Theo handled it with such professionalism that there was nothing concrete to attack. The client was impressed that we'd caught the error proactively. Theo's reputation took a small hit, but nothing fatal. What I didn't expect was what Marcus would do next. 2 weeks later, I was called into Marcus's office. He was smiling, which was never a good sign. "Adrian," he said, "I've been impressed with your work. I'd like to move you to my team. It's a significant opportunity." My stomach dropped. This wasn't an opportunity. This was a power play. Marcus knew about me and Theo. I don't know how. Maybe he'd seen us at lunch. Maybe someone had talked. Maybe he just had good instincts for other people's vulnerabilities. But he knew, and this was him testing what he could do with that information. "I'm very happy on Theo's team," I said carefully. "Are you?" Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Because from where I sit, you might be a little too happy there. People talk, Adrian. They notice things. Friendships that seem a bit too close. Late nights alone together. I'd hate for there to be any inappropriate rumours affecting your career." There it was. The threat wrapped in concern. "Work for me, or I'll destroy both of you." I felt sick. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of. The power someone could have over you when they knew your secrets. Marcus could tank my career with a few well-placed insinuations. He could make sure I never worked in corporate law again. And Theo would suffer even more because he was senior, because he should have known better. "I'll think about it," I managed. "You do that," Marcus said, "but don't think too long." I went straight to Theo's office and closed the door. I must have looked as panicked as I felt because he immediately stood up. "What happened?" I told him everything, watched his face darken with anger. "That bastard," Theo said quietly. "He's been looking for leverage against me for months." "What do?" I asked. "If I don't take the transfer, he'll start rumours. If I do, he'll just find another way to use this against us." Theo was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him thinking, weighing options. This was what he was good at, strategy and chess moves and seeing 3 steps ahead. Finally, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Do you trust me?" he asked. "Yes." "Then let me handle Marcus. But Adrian, I need to know something first. Are you in this? With me? Because if you're not, if this is just something casual for you, then you should take the transfer and we'll pretend this never happened." My heart was pounding. It's not casual. Theo, I'm terrified. And I have no idea what I'm doing, but I've never felt like this about anyone. So yes, I'm in this. He smiled then, soft and real. "Okay, then trust me." What Theo did next was either brilliant or insane, and I still can't decide which. He went to the managing partner, Catherine Chen, and told her everything. Not just about Marcus's threat, but about us. About our relationship, about Marcus's attempts at manipulation, about the toxic environment Marcus was creating. I didn't know he was doing this until Catherine called me into her office the next day. I thought I was getting fired. Instead, she asked me to confirm Theo's account, and she listened without judgment as I explained everything. "I want you to know," Catherine said when I finished, "that this firm has clear policies against discrimination and harassment. What Marcus did was attempt to leverage your personal life for professional gain. That's not acceptable." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now? Marcus gets a very clear conversation about boundaries and appropriate behaviour. You and Theo will need to disclose your relationship to HR, and will need to adjust reporting structures so there's no conflict of interest. But Adrian, you're not in trouble. Neither is Theo." I felt like I could breathe for the first time in days. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Theo for having the courage to bring this forward. Not everyone would have risked their career like that. That's when it really hit me. Theo had risked everything. He'd exposed our relationship to the managing partner, knowing it could backfire, knowing it could cost him the career he'd worked years to build. He'd done it to protect me. He'd had the power to save himself by letting me take the transfer, by distancing himself from me, by throwing me to Marcus's wolves. Instead, he'd chosen to be vulnerable, to fight for us. I found him in his office, staring out the window at the Seattle skyline. When he heard me come in, he turned, and I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Catherine told me what you did," I said. "I couldn't let him use us like that," Theo said. "I couldn't let him make you choose between your career and your life." I crossed the room and wrapped my arms around him, pressed my face against his shoulder. "You could have been fired. So could you." His arms came around me solid and sure. "Adrian, I meant what I said. I'm falling for you. That means I protect you even when it's scary, especially when it's scary." "I love you," I said, and I felt him go still. "I know it's fast, and maybe I'm not supposed to say it yet, but I love you. You're the bravest person I've ever met." He pulled back just enough to look at me, and his eyes were bright. "Say it again. I love you." He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I love you too," he said against my lips. "I've been waiting to say that." Marcus was quietly moved to a different division. Theo and I disclosed our relationship properly, and I was transferred to work under a different senior associate. The office gossip lasted about a week before some other drama took over. Turns out most people didn't actually care who we loved as long as we did our jobs well. That was 8 months ago. We moved in together last month, into an apartment with actual separate rooms and windows that let in real sunlight. Theo's books mixed with mine on the shelves, his coffee mugs in my kitchen, his clothes in my closet. All these small intimacies that still make me catch my breath sometimes. I'm not going to pretend it's all been easy. Coming out at work was just the first step. I still haven't told my family, though I'm working up to it. I still have moments of fear, of wondering if I'm doing this right, of feeling like I'm not enough. But Theo is patient with all of it. He holds my hand through the panic attacks. He reminds me that love isn't something you have to earn. He shows me every day what it means to be chosen, to be protected, to be cherished. Last week we were having dinner at home, nothing fancy, just pasta and wine and terrible reality TV playing in the background. Theo was telling me some story about a client meeting, animated and laughing, and I just stopped and stared at him. "What?" he asked, smiling. "I'm happy," I said, and it came out wondering. "I'm just really happy." His expression softened. "Yeah? Yeah. I didn't know it could feel like this." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Like what?" "Safe," I said. "Like I can be all of who I am and it's not just okay, it's wanted." "Adrian," Theo said, and his voice was gentle, "you'll always be wanted. Exactly as you are." I think about that first night in my apartment sometimes, about the choice I made to tell him about the error. How easily I could have protected myself instead. How different everything would be if I had. But I also think about what Theo taught me that night, and every night since. That real love isn't about power, it's about choosing to be vulnerable together. It's about protecting each other even when it costs you something. It's about seeing someone's fear and saying I'm here anyway. Theo had the power to destroy me in so many ways. He knew my secrets, my fears, my weaknesses. He could have used our relationship to advance his career, or ended it to save his reputation, or let Marcus's threats push us apart. But at every turn he chose something different. He chose honesty. He chose courage. He chose us. And in choosing us, he taught me how to choose myself, how to stop hiding, how to believe that I deserved to take up space in the world, to want things, to love openly. He gave me the safety to become who I was always meant to be. That's what love is, I think. Not the dramatic gestures or the perfect moments, though we have those too. It's the daily choice to show up for each other, to be brave when it matters, to build something together that's stronger than what either of us could build alone. I'm still learning, still figuring out how to navigate a world that isn't always kind to people like us, still working on telling my family, on being more open, on letting go of the shame I carried for so long. But I'm not doing it alone anymore. I have Theo with his steady presence and his terrible jokes and his absolute certainty that we're worth fighting for. And I have myself, finally, the version of me that doesn't have to hide, that can love freely and fully, that can stand on the edge of that cliff and know that even if I fall, someone will be there to catch me. That's what Theo gave me when he chose to protect me instead of destroy me. Not just his love, but permission to love myself. And that, more than anything, is the real story. Not about finding someone else, but about finding yourself in the mirror of their eyes and recognizing, finally, that you're enough. We're planning a trip to Portland next month to visit Theo's family. After that, maybe I'll be ready to bring him home to Idaho. Maybe not, but either way we'll figure it out together. That's what we do now. We face things together, and every morning when I wake up next to him, when I see his face soft with sleep, when he opens his eyes and smiles at me like I'm the best thing he's ever seen, I feel that same flutter in my chest I felt the first night in the break room. Except now I know what it is. Now I can name it. It's love. Simple and complicated, terrifying and wonderful, the scariest and best thing I've ever done, and I wouldn't change a single second of it.